Hello, everyone, and welcome to season 2 of What's Eating Us, Maverick Citizens Food Justice Podcast.
I want to pick up specifically on this issue of marketing to children. And I see that that's obviously explicitly stated in the regulations themselves. I wonder if maybe we can have some examples where, there has been marketing directly to children, and maybe the marketing is not direct. Maybe what the marketing is kind of more sort of below the line, or it's undertones of marketing towards children, because I think this might help people to kind of think more about how it is that kind of big food and industry sort of shapes our thinking, and also starts to shape the thinking of children from a young age. Do you want to come in there, Nzama?
Yeah, certainly. So I think Petronell has really done a very great work in terms of explaining this, the front of peg. And I think the issue here, particularly with children, right, is morally and legally, children cannot be exposed to certain things. Like you cannot do child labor to add on that, right? So there are very specific things. If morally the food industry, like there are companies like Coke that pledged actually not to advertise to children, but what do you call in every tech shop in school when there's an advertisement of Coke? What do you call in the primary school? What is that, right? If you buy cornflakes, right? And because children are very image driven, or you buy a formula milk, what is in the box of Kellogg's? There is a cartoon. If there is a celebrity or an endorsement by someone, by a rapper, a sportsman, for children that they look up to, when you walk with them in the supermarket, they pick that product even before they even know what is the taste. That's why there are toys, and kids will pick up toys because kids are very much image driven. So if you want children, you don't want to harm children, and you don't want children to be exposed to extreme marketing, what adverts play during the family times and weekends? So what do you call that? That is really very direct and targeted. If you have adverts that play during family time that are of nature of like very much unhealthy products, it means children, because children believe what they see. Children are very image driven. It makes them to be very much vulnerable. And if they are at the age of going, and children are actually very powerful in terms of determining the buying power in the household. Children do pick stuff if you were to go with them in the supermarket in what they want. So it's very important that in this targeted marketing to children, that actually also drives the buying power and the products that are actually bought in the household overall, not only for the foods that children eat, but overall in terms, because kids say, I have seen this is good. There was let me give an example. There was an energy drink that was vigorously marketed in this country very recently. And that energy drink was going bananas. Parents were breaking stores and lining up. It was very expensive, but the dude really invested in marketing. So marketing is a very powerful tool to hook up children, including my kids. They wanted that product. You understand? So because for kids look at things like, what is the lifestyle? What is the flavor of the moment? Kids, like young people, like are actually very driven about what is trending. So marketing, when you have no marketing restriction to children, including formula milk, to that point, you are actually exposing kids to harmful food. And no wonder we are having children as early as 7, as 8, having high blood pressure that is linked to diet. It's because children are eating food that's unhealthy. My son is 14 years old. I like to talk about practicality. He had a chest infection. And what was the result? They said, what diet, what food is he eating? So it's very, very important that, like, the front of pack present us with an opportunity, including people who are not food literate, to be able at the glance to make a decision about purchase of products and what is standing out to be unhealthy about the product. So those are very much practical examples. If you browse on internet, children use a lot of internet. When you browse on Google Chrome, what comes first? Before you get to what you need, what is going to pop up? It's an advert of an unhealthy product. So that is very much targeted. I haven't gone to the social media. That is very much targeted to actually to children and young people, in a sense. So those are very much practical examples, which actually need to be addressed in terms of, like, if we want to have a healthy nation, we need to have an informed nation, and the front of pack present exactly that opportunity, because information shouldn't be something that we should scratch our head to get. Information should be in our face. And make no mistake, people will still make purchases of food that is unhealthy, but at least they will be informed. And I think if you look in comparison to tobacco, all of us here who are in this, we know the harms of tobacco because of the regulation and the food environment. The food industry and the food environment has not been regulated for so many years. And where there have been regulations, the food industry has always got the loopholes. Look at the R991, for example. We had to do a campaign of "Not Today, Nestle." You're not going to do it today. You're not going to break the law with the law in place. So we're dealing with a very big problem of a society that doesn't have morality, where profits exceed people's health. And all these arguments about any kind of regulation, including the sugar tax, including everything, is about the bottom line for the industry. And it's not about the people's lives. And the industry comes again and say, oh, but we also care about people. People should just be educated, right? Has the food industry taken the nod with the muscles they have to educate people? HEALA does nutrition literacy with a tiny budget because we care about people knowing what they are eating. We care about people being informed, because an informed population, it's a healthy population in a way.
Is it okay if I just add something? Because Nzama said something that I think was very important. So, one of the very first things he spoke about was effectively the Coke pledge. And he spoke about, that we see that producers are coming forward and claiming that they will regulate themselves. They will make sure that this is done voluntarily. Okay, so the very first thing to understand within that is that already in and of itself is an admission from those producers that there is some need for regulation of this. So now the question is whether or not doing it by themselves can work. There's been a formal study done on adherence to the Coke pledge in Gauteng, and it was found that in half of the schools that was part of the study group, or the study set, that Coke was still being sold, the sugar version. In 30% of those schools, it was still being advertised. And in fact, 10% of those schools had branding on the front of the gates. So, I mean, that is a very clear indication, and just really close to home here in Gauteng, that even when it's the actual parameters are very clear. It just doesn't happen. And the reality is with these voluntary regulatory mechanisms is that the parameters aren't very clear. So the very first thing is that most of these voluntary bodies and pledges don't want to protect children over 12. So they want to define children as 12 and under, which has absolutely no basis. And there's a fight about what should be deemed child-directed and what should not be deemed. Then, of course, what would be the sanction if the relevant producer doesn't actually meet their own standard? Will they be giving themselves a slap on the hand? So it's really important that there is some form of state regulation. And if you read very closely, most major food producers, because this has been coming for quite some time, have in the past at various occasions made admissions that said that there is a need to have increased regulation on this issue. But then, of course, they come with whatever specific argument that, is hot in the day. Oh, but this won't be effective. Oh, no, we think it should be education. Oh, no, we think it should be that. And I think we need to ask ourselves, does the specific suggestion for the food environment come from someone with a for-profit motive or from an independent body? Because I think that will disclose a lot as to what the actual effective policy intervention that's being proposed is intended to do. If it comes from someone who's pursuing a for-profit motive, they have a duty under the Companies Act to protect the shareholders' interest. What is the shareholders' interest? Profit. You can't get around that. That's the law. So we need to start looking at policy interventions that's being asked for by NGOs, community-based organizations, independent think tanks, universities, and look at that evidence base.
Thanks, Petronell. I think I'm wary of us sort of losing sight based on all the kind of technicalities that people are kind of throwing up as reasons, I guess, for or against these kind of package label regulations. Because as I foregrounded in the discussion, is that what is at stake here is people's health, right? And what is at stake is our public health crisis. Because what we're saying is this is the very real impact that this is having on people. Of particular concern is the issue of sort of getting children at such a young age to just kind of fit into the system. The idea, I suppose, being that it becomes a generational acceptance of this is just how your dietary intake is shaped, and this is your nutritional outlook. So for me, I'd like to understand from your side, and I see the chat box, I see all your questions. I will be getting to that. Just as I'm asking this question, I'll get to the chat box. My question is, on the ground, right? As Nzama alluded to, that Hila is doing a lot of work on the ground. So you go out into these communities, right? And you see people who are living with these diseases, and these, you've noted that it's people from low income areas, right? Now, describe to me some of the people that you've met. For example, somebody who has diabetes, what does their life look like on a day-to-day basis in terms of managing that, in terms of having the access to the resources that will help them to manage that? What does that do to their quality of life, not just for themselves, but for their family? I'd like us to just really draw a very clear human picture of what this actually manifests as.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Zuka. And I think that is the most critical part. And I think before I answer that question, I'll answer in 30 seconds, is there must be rules of engagement. There must be rules governing how food industry does business. No one is saying the food industry must shut down, right? There must be road signs if we're going to drive on the road. So that is not a question. People's health are at stake here. And the question you have raised is, I'm not only talking about what people are saying. Diabetes is at home, right? My sister has to make sure that she gets food that she must eat as a diabetic patient in a population that is very much starch and pap heavy. She has to find alternatives. That is money. She needs to have money to get a taxi for 10 kilometers return to collect her medication monthly, right? So these are daily realities in what now diabetes takes from her and in terms of her feeding her children and managing to survive. So this is the picture that she's having. She has to deal with the nutrition script that she has got now that she's diabetic. So the thing is, the damage that the food industry does compared to what it's giving, okay? It's saying it's paying taxes, it's employing people, but the cost of health care, the cost of life, the cost to the environment, it's something that is it's measurable what the industry is giving. It's unmeasurable what the cost, the damage that the industry is giving. So we're talking about the family that is living in crisis. When she's unwell, she can't do a job, right? So her incomes, it's no work, no pay. She works in a factory where it's clocking per day and money for a day. If she's unwell, she's losing an income. She has to actually make sure that she has the food and the nutrition that she eats. So she has to cook a separate food compared to others because she can eat food with so much salt, she can eat things with so much sugar, she can eat a lot of starch, she can, and all that. That script that she's given now that she's sick, it's too late by then to try to manage diabetes. And in a country where we are striving for health equity and trying to introduce measures of bringing health equity, such as the National Health Insurance, we saw the Stats SA saying the stats that you spoke about, non-communicable diseases have doubled, right? So it's scary because we are talking about these health conditions, diabetes, it's in our household. We're no longer talking about hearing of someone on the radio. You saw what happened with HIV. It started as something that was like, oh, we have HIV, until we had the tsunami where we're burying people in multitude of people every day, that there was a response. We can't wait for that. Already, the cost of unhealthy food and overall ill health is too much. The mortality rate and morbidity due to non-communicable disease is already too much. We can't wait for this problem to triple and have a quadruplet of death in order to act. So regulation is here, and the food industry, whether they like it or not, they will have to live with it. There will be rules of engagement, and HEALA will be spearheading that, right? And will confront everyone who wants to fight ill health. It's not something that it's a joke. It's not something that is confrontational. It's a reality. We're gonna make sure that we promote good health in this country. We have good health promotion. We're gonna make sure that people get information through regulation, through the education we're doing, through all the means, and we're gonna make sure that people are safe, and we're gonna make sure that people are actually have good health at the end of the day. So that is a picture, Zuki, of a single mother that has to struggle with those and bringing up her children now with this health condition. The culprit is saying, no, don't regulate me. I don't know, right? If how many people will be able to save if people were informed, about the harms, just like tobacco. And that's where front of pack comes in as an important tool to have informed citizens.
Thanks, Nzama. That's a very, very vivid picture that you've painted there, and a very scary one at the same time. Okay, I'm going to the audience questions now. Petronell, this one is directed specifically at you. This is from Jeanette Pisari, and she says, is the current nutrient profiling model, which R3337 is based on, specific enough to focus on ultra-processed foods only, or would staple foods such as bread, maize meal, and the like also require front-of-package labeling?
That is a very good question, and Jeanette, I'm going to try and answer it to the best of my capacity. And I'm going to answer it by saying, I know we've spoken a lot about ultra-processed foods today, but something that's important to understand is that the front of pack warning label will not have something akin to this is an ultra-processed product label, even though that is something that we've actually heard people speaking about potentially doing in the future. What the actual nutrient profile model has done is taken a selection of thousands of foods and have created thresholds over which certain nutrients of concern should then be flagged with consumers. So the idea being that if a specific product, regardless of, if as long as it's packaged, it qualifies for the actual label, and if based on the nutrient profile model, it has a high amount of sugar, the warning label will simply say, be careful, high amounts of sugar. It isn't actually designed at this stage for us to specifically say, oh, no, this is ultra processed, this isn't. And I think that might allay a lot of fears that have been seen popping up in the chat box here about some of the sort of definitional issues that have been raised with ultra processed foods. This is based on, quite easily to determine nutrients of concern and thresholds that have been locally tested. I hope that answers your question, Jeanette.
Okay, thanks for that. So the next question is from Andrew Robinson. Andrew says, the dairy industry spends more than 60 million per annum on marketing, most aimed at children. The same industry spends heavily to sponsor research, with its bias obscuring the potential health harms of dairy products. Are children made aware of this information? I don't know if who wants to take a stab at this question.
Yeah, I can start. I mean, Petronell can talk more on that, on marketing as she. So we have drawn the picture of the amount of billions that is spent on marketing. So thank you for raising that, because it's just talking about one industry. But the industry's investment in the marketing to children and marketing broadly to society, it's scary. It's very, very scary. And that same amount of investment is aiming at getting a hook, right? Of the consumer to these products. It's not at the interest of the consumer. It's at the interest of profit making. And I think I will have to say this again. Some of us were coming from the struggle of HIV. The food industry is not going to make us delusional that they are causing this problem and they will resolve the problem for us. Just like pharmaceutical companies. They didn't want to play the ball, but we pressed ahead. We supported government. We created pressure until we got ARVs accessible and affordable by the state to save lives. We're going to do the same. So talking from the position of authority is that as communities will organize and will mobilize to protect people's health. That is not even a question mark. So any life that is lost is a big issue. So this marketing, the huge investment in marketing, is not going to be stopped. It can be put on healthy products. It can be put on things. It's not going to be a marketing that is vividly targeted to children, that is vividly targeted to the population at the expense of our health. So I think that is the bottom line at the end of the day. As society, we will stand up, and this regulation is just the beginning of many other actions that, as part of food justice, We want people to have income in their household. We'll support initiative of social support for families to be able to afford food that is healthy. It's a constitutional right for people to have adequate food. And adequate food, it must be food that is of good quality, food that has got good nutrition and cannot cause ill health. So thanks, Zugin.
Thanks for that, Nzama. I think just to kind of draw the discussion back, some of the questions that I still wanted to sort of ventilate a bit more. Is this an issue of, South Africans being kind of nannied? Is it about taking away people's, right to choose the foods that they want to choose? Or is there an understanding that, people will eat what they will eat? However, it's about understanding that, everything in moderation, but also understanding the risks that are associated with the foods that you're taking in, specifically for children.
I'm happy to start off this discussion, Zukiswa. And that is a good question, and we've actually seen this pop up sort of in the UK discussion about a soda tax there. The reality is this regulation doesn't put a prohibition on the sale of any kinds of foods, and it's not going much further with the kind of endorsements and proclamations that can be put on foods. And the reality is that food is something that we are now seeing increasingly is becoming important. It's leading to high rates of death. We know that non-communicable diseases cost every South African about 2,700 rands per year. We know it takes up 16% of the budget. So it would be actually very negligent of the state to not intervene and to try and create a food environment that's permissive for healthier eating. And if you think about it, the fact that this regulation is really aimed at providing information to the public and then giving them the opportunity to make decisions about what food to eat and not eat is actually a very small policy intervention. And it can go quite further. There are, for example, there was a lawsuit in India which put an outright prohibition on foods that are high in sugar, salts, and fats within schools. And that was deemed to be actually constitutionally acceptable in that context. And that's a much wider reaching intervention. So this intervention is actually quite mild. And I just have to point out something that I find very interesting. I see this happening in our own chat section here. There seems to be there's an assertion that this intervention will not work and all kinds of recourse to examples. Specifically, I saw a Chile example, but at the same time, there's also an assertion that it will cost the industry money, and those two things can't exist at the same time. You can't claim that this is going to change consumers' eating patterns, but at the same time say it's going to have absolutely no impact. So I think that's my side of the answer. Nzama, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think you have actually sum it up, Petronell. And I think at the end of the day is it doesn't matter what interest you represent as a person. At the end of the day, no one is taking away the industry's role in society. All we are saying is that the front of pack is part of regulatory framework, because regulation and restrictions are key in enforcing compliance. And if we're talking about good health in a country that is so much struggling with the poor infrastructure in the public health, where I am, if I was to be sick and go to a public health facility, that we can have pre-prevention measures in place, including regulations, including other interventions, as Petronell have said. So there's no question about the importance of this tool in our toolbox. But we also acknowledge that there are many other interventions in realizing food justice that we need to pursue for people to access adequate food, for people to access nutritious food. And with all those interventions, with all role players joining hands, we will continue to strive for that as an ultimate goal in our lifetime. But it's important that we don't just listen to one person's interest, right? As long as a person cannot prove, like tobacco industry doesn't want the new bill to be implemented, right? Because it's about bottom line, it's about profits at the end of the day. So we do understand where the food industry is coming from and their anxieties. But I think at the end of the day, in the balance of probability, people's health must come first. It doesn't matter what Hila thinks. If Hila tomorrow becomes something else, maybe a puppet for food industry, it doesn't matter. Someone has to stand up and still speak the truth and say, we need to protect people's health at the end of the day. So we do understand the varying interests that are coming from corridors, because people are paid to do what they need to do at the end of the day. But I think as the state, as civil society, as all role players, we should put the lives of our children up front. We should make sure that children are not perverted, and are not actually skewed up in terms of resulting in bad health. The first 1,000 days, we're talking Petronell, even before we talk about schooling. What are children eating when they are born, right? Why is breastfeeding so low? It's also because of vigorous marketing by Nestle and the formula industry. Even in this province, there have been a culture of people breastfeeding. Formula milk was made to be equivalent to breast milk, was punted to be equivalent to breast milk. So you understand that kind of claims and what it does to society when it's not regulated. At the end of the day, people will still make choices. And there are people who are taking unhealthy products, but knowingly. The issue is a right to know. The issue is create an environment where people can be protected. And that is the importance of front of pack and the regulation.
Thanks, Nzama. I think that was a very good sort of summation of what the argument is here. And we are running out of time. Actually, we've run out of time. But I think what people can take away from this and maybe understand is that the space of food is actually quite a politicized and commercialized space, in light of it also being a public health crisis that needs, closer consideration than what people may have been aware of. And, everybody has a right to know what it is that they're putting into their bodies, particularly what they're putting into their children's bodies. And with that, thanks everybody for joining us, and goodbye.
My name is Zukiswa Pikoli, and this has been another episode of What's Eating Us with Maverick Citizen.